This podcast is brought to you by Primary Arms. Primary Arms seeks to provide the best shopping experience for everything firearms, with over 13,000 products from over 400 top brands. Primary Arms carries a complete selection of rifles, handguns, firearms parts, shooting gear, apparel, and more. Every order comes with a commitment to superior service, backed by fast shipping and an expert support team. Primary Arms, serving freedom since 2008. Find out more at frn.deals/PA. Hello and welcome to the AR-15 podcast. This podcast is for you if you just bought your first rifle or if you've been building them for years. There is something we can all do to take our black rifles to the next level. My name is Nick Dooley, and we are joined here again for another night in a row for a very special AR-15 podcast. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Garth Ofer.
I don't even need the mic because I just saw you. I have nothing new to add to this right now. So just why don't we introduce our guest? Dun, dun, dun.
Yes, we are joined today by a good friend of ours, Stuart and Stalwart, Second Amendment supporter, Pastor Craig.
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Pastor Craig. Also known as, I think when I came downstairs, your daughter goes, "Hey, dude, come down here." That guy, too.
Yep. That guy. Hey, dude. Hey, guy. Hey, guy.
Guy.
Hey, guy. Yeah,
Hey, guy.
that pops up every now and then.
Yeah.
So we brought this idea up a while ago, and I know that we're all here. I'll slide in a little closer to Garth.
Like I can hang out.
Dooley and Garth, you should cuddle.
Yes.
You should cuddle.
Well, I'll hang out back here, so it's fine.
So a while ago, we had talked about having you on. We're going to have some other people on as well, but this is going to be the start of a new kind of series for us that we're going to open up. I think it'll be the best way to put it, wouldn't you, Garth?
I think so, yeah.
And what that is we're talking to people from various walks of life and different, not going to say positions in the community, but different kind of ways of looking at things than how other people generally would. And we're going to do that to talk about why it is, like what the AR means to them and kind of bring out more of this Second Amendment advocacy that we have been talking about. Because, it's long been stated that, well, yes, the First Amendment is incredibly important because of all the things that it covers. There is even more kind of at stake because if you didn't have the Second Amendment, that right to defend the rest of them, you kind of start losing the rest of those amendments.
Hey, by the way, what falls within the First Amendment?
That would be freedom of religion. Actually,
yeah. Yeah. We're gonna go there. We're gonna go there tonight, I think.
Well, I hope we do.
And that's fine because it's well, granted, I did not prepare a new training card for tonight because if you guys want to talk about training, we should have listened to the episode we recorded last night, but which will be out later this week, about Trigger Interactive and the interactive target shooting system that it is.
A multi-million-dollar operation that is fantastic, and I can't wait to own one because I will own one, and it is going to revolutionize the way I train because I as well as I enjoy your training tips, I hate shooting paper. And with this new system we talked about last night, I'll spend some coin on it. It's going to be worth it because the scenarios you can set up through this system are fantastic. And I can't, wait to have that in my hands. I mean, we kind of actually do right now because someone's forgetful, but I don't think he'd appreciate that about us. So
Yes. Just because, we wind up with prototypes every now and then.
Yeah.
But so we'll kind of forego the training tip this week, and we've already talked about Primary Arms. Should we talk about Patriot Patch Co on the front end?
We probably should. Patriot Patch Company, patriotpatch.co. I never get to say that, so I was happy.
PatriotPatch.co.
Yes.
And I'm not getting a dime for saying that, but I have been told I got a radio voice. So.
Yes. Well, it's like me. You know, I have a face for radio and a voice for sign language.
Good. I like it.
But no, PatriotPatch.co. You know, they make all of the awesome tins, like the well, I guess it's on the other side of that wall.
Yeah.
The 4 rules of gun safety. You know, a bunch of different decorative metal tins. Then, of course, all of the morale patches. I know that September's patch of the month is pretty awesome. It is Lady Liberty with nods on, and she has a roll-in special up in front of her, and it says, "Make ready," as she is slamming a magazine home.
I want one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's their great stuff, high quality PVC patches. Go over there, check them out. Give Jake and the boys a shout over there, and be prepared to be parted with money.
Yeah.
So why don't we go ahead and start to jump into the topic tonight? And when we talk about advocacy, we have long been beating the drum that everyone needs to understand how important our rights are as Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And we should not let any of those rights be taken away from us. And the one that seems to come under fire the most is always the second.
No pun intended.
That's good. That's good.
And
unfortunately,
unfortunately, that is one of those things. Now,
well, they can't take anything else away until the Second Amendment is gone. So
that is true.
Then we become Australia.
Yeah, Australia, who's
England.
And England and
most of Europe,
yeah,
and Russia, and
China.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, a bunch of places that I don't want to be. So, as someone who has spent a lot of their adult life traveling around to third world countries and seeing living conditions there, I can honestly say that 90% of Americans do not realize just how amazing we have it here.
Yeah, that's
we truly do live in the best place on earth. It's
well, we do, and so maybe a little bit of background jumping in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
we'll go with background. So obviously, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about like how you got into guns, and then we'll instead of just diving straight into the middle of everything, as I am generally want to do.
We do that.
Yeah. So my background, again, I'm Pastor Craig, and serve in the Lutheran denomination for 11 years now. Been ordained. No, I did not think I was going to be a pastor since I was a child. I figured I was going to be a fighter jet pilot. I think I had every line of Top Gun memorized by the time I was 8 years old. My mother was not impressed. She came down the stairs like while I was saying, "And you asshole."
Well, that was because your mouth was writing checks that your ass couldn't cash.
Something like that. Yeah. literally, like my dad and I were watching it for like the 50th time, and my mom comes down the stairs right as I'm saying, "And you asshole, if you fuck up this much, you'll be flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong." And my mom looks at me and she goes, "No more, no more." And my dad quickly pulled it out of the VHS, and then we kept watching it down the road. But So I thought that for a long time. That didn't pan out. I had this twisted, weird idea of being an orthodontist. I don't know. That fortunately did not pan out. And one thing led to another. And now I'm a pastor in the Lutheran Church for the last 11 years. I've been serving in my current context for 5, and that's how I met you guys.
Yep.
In fact, on a regular basis on Thursday nights, we typically have a thing called Marty's Mug. Which I can go down that historical path for in its own time, but and one thing led to another. Your wife, I think, invited you guys along. We connected, met, and I think the very first night we were like guns. Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think I walked into what at the time was supposed to be some sort of a devotional study,
a theological debate of sorts,
theological debate of sorts, and I walked in, and the exact words were, "What are we going to do about the ATF and AR pistols?"
Was that me or you? I think we both looked at each other like,
that was 100% you.
We popped through the door, and that's exactly what we heard.
And I sat down and said, well, first, what we need to do is fill out a comment card.
Yes, which I have done way too many times, unfortunately.
Yep. These are things that have all happened. And that was kind of how we met and then started having a lot of these discussions.
Yeah.
And then we kind of just kept rolling with all of it.
Yep. And one thing led to another. We're shooting next to each other and talking guns, talking shop, talking about life, talking about how to raise families and the status of our country and the world. And it just spirals every single time we get together, right?
Strangely enough, it does.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's funny. People come and ask him for life advice and then turn around and look at me and go, so I was looking at this 30-06 the other day, and I have to know like random ballistic information.
It's funny. It's funny what you get asked to do. What's your job? Oh, it doesn't matter what your job is. Garth, what about this motorcycle? Garth, what about this gun? I don't know about this gun. Let me talk to Dooley here, okay? I only know so much, but I know a man who knows so much more.
Yeah, and then I go down a rabbit hole about 404 Jeffries as a parent case. But that's 300 Winchester short magnum, so we're not going to talk about that.
Sure.
Although there was a time when Winchester had a super short magnum, and Remington also made them, and you could get a 300 Remington short action ultra mag in an AR-10.
Really?
Yeah, so it was a 300 Win Mag level rifle in an AR-10 sized.
You know, if Matt listens to this, he's going to want one of those shortly.
Yeah, the company, the loan company that made barrels for them, is out of business now.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. How about that?
You just grab a piece of steel and you start carving with your Swiss Army knife. I'm just kidding. That is not what we do.
Yeah, well, we'll take a 308 barrel and then I'll just ream it when I get my lathe.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Dooley, how did I end up with you guys like here tonight?
So we went through this and kind of like we touched on earlier. I am getting yelled at because no history lessons tonight.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But we set this up and we had talked about it. I was like, hey, do you want to come on the podcast? And you also have your own podcast as well. So you're like, I am fairly versed in this and I like to get on and talk about guns and things. And when we started to go through this, it was all right, we're gonna just have you on and we're gonna talk a little bit about the AR and do a little bit about rights, a little bit about the reasons why, what the state of the country is. And I know for a fact that you are an AR guy.
Yep.
Like,
yep.
I know that you may have handled an AK recently.
Oh.
Yep.
Did you buy one?
No.
Shooting his.
The one that I was showing him that astigmatism correction.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually,
No, because that's the only firearm I have that had the right size red dot to demo my. Yeah, because every now and then you need to realize how inferior a platform is. So I have one.
That's why it's AR-15 podcast.
Yes.
Not the
AK-47 podcast.
Right.
Because those guys went under after like their second or third episode.
Must have been the ballistic trajectory that did not work out in their favor.
Yes.
No, actually, what it was when we went on the podcast
that was a different one.
Oh, different one.
Stamped hot metal.
Oh my goodness! How many people need to talk about the AK?
No, but it keeps going under.
Oh well, they should stop. I was going to say it was from the last guys we did battle with, and then I asked them, hey, what gun would you still grab in the apocalypse if it were to happen tomorrow? And three of them said their AR. So 3-hour podcast was really null and void.
Well,
yeah, the only guy who said he would grab his AK is the guy who makes a living manufacturing high-end AKs.
Well, yeah.
because you have to breathe on an AK.
Mhm.
But
But
that's
we're talking
we're
ARs.
talking
But
about
we're
ARs.
talking
So when did you start getting into shooting? And then I know that one of we've had several conversations about whether or not how close a certain Cerakote person does to get close to Daniel Defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We I started shooting a long time ago when I was younger. Probably couldn't put an age to it. I mean, Nerf guns. I was a master with the Nerf bow. I was like Legolas from Lord of the Rings with the Nerf bow. But and actually, most of my launching projectiles downrange was archery. Most of my childhood was actually archery, and I used to shoot for a couple different ranges over in Sioux Falls where I grew up, also out in the hills. And I stopped shooting archery because it wasn't quite as challenging. And that some might say that sounds arrogant. I don't mean for that at all. But archery is purely about obviously fundamentals like firearms, but it just worked. And I was Robin Hooding arrows, and I was like, okay. But I always loved firearms as well. And firearms has always been more of a challenge. I think all things in life are perishable skills. And firearms are, I would, for me personally, is much more perishable. And so I always like the challenge. And most actually of my shooting time or career, I don't call it a career, but has been around pistol shooting. I used to shoot competitively IDPA and the such. And then as I got older and I could actually buy my own first rifle, my first rifle I ever bought was an M1 Garand, also known as the M1 Garand. And actually a dear friend of mine who was a Korean War veteran, Marine Corps, hooked me up with his buddy who sat me down with my M1. He called me up because my grandfather, can I go on a tangent? I'm already in there.
Go down the tangent. Down the rabbit hole we go.
My grandfather was in the Korean War. And I always said that I wanted to get an M1 because that's what he toted around Korea. And this was when I served in the last church I served in, and the old guy named Dave, awesome guy, he called me up one day. He goes, "Pastor, today is a day in which you ask for forgiveness, not permission." And I said, "What does that mean, Dave?" He goes, "My dear friend Gary has an M1. In fact, he has 6 of them, and he is willing to sell one to you because I told him your story about your grandfather." And I said, "How much do you want?" And he told me. So I went down to the bank. My wife was at work. I went down to the bank, and by about 2 in the afternoon, I was sitting on Gary's back deck, and he said, "Now we need to teach you how to shoot this thing." And it was just this glorious story. And he was, like that phrase, political correctness, which is, I think, killing our country. He was not politically correct whatsoever. And we went down to, we were actually at Dave's house at this point. Got the rifle at Gary's, went over to Dave's house. We went out to Dave's wife's garden, took about 6 pumpkins out of the garden. And we hopped in his little side-by-side, drove down range, set him up on the hillside, drove back, and Gary goes, "Pastor, we got to sit down. We're going to learn how to do this. We're going to do it right. You're going to go prone." And he had basically that accent, but I'm amplifying it a little bit. And I'm like, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "That's sir? Yes, sir." "Sir, yes, sir." And, of course, Dave busts out laughing. And these 2 guys served together. And I line up. He goes, "How many yards do you think that is?" And I said, "It's about 300 yards, sir." "Sir, yes, sir." And he pulls out his little Sig Sauer rangefinder, and I looked at him. I said, "Did they give you? Is that standard issue equipment there in the Korea?" He goes, "Shut the." And I was like, and then Dave gave me a kick in the heel as I'm laying prone, meaning don't push it, right? And he ranges it out. He goes, 309 yards. That is pretty damn good, Pastor. Now he goes, "Let me teach you how to do this." So he said, "You need to bottom out that barrel drum, go up 8 clicks, loosen the set screw, put that at your 100 yards. So we did that. He goes, now since you're at 300-ish yards, go to the 300 and do that. Pull the trigger first time. He's got his little, he's behind the glass, and he goes, you're just high. You're doing that damn newfangled shit. That's what he said. And I said, excuse me, sir. He goes, you're putting the post over top of the bullseye. You're putting the post over the pumpkin. I said, yes, sir. He goes, yeah, that's that newfangled shit. He said, you got to do what we did back in the day. He said, you put the post underneath the head of the Nazi, and you put the Nazi's head on top of the post, and you squeeze the trigger. I looked at him, I said, are you allowed to say it, sir? He goes, shut up, and put the pumpkin on the post. And I put the pumpkin on the post. Boom, blew it up.
Oh, yes, the 6 o'clock hold.
It was glorious. So that was the first rifle I ever bought. And fell in love with that. And very quickly after that, fell in love with the ARs. And yeah, it spiraled from there a little bit.
Yeah.
So where do we want to go with that there?
So you got your first rifle,
Mm-hmm.
which was, in some say, the Lord's caliber 30-06.
It is.
And
There's nothing more fun than boom, 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 8 times. Bling.
yep. And Clint Smith has a great comment about that, and he talks about the end block or from Thunder Ranch.
Yep.
And he talks about the end block loader popping out, and he'll go through it. Everybody says, "Oh, it's a bad design," because they go boom, 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 ping, and that lets the enemy know you're out of ammunition.
Yeah, right.
Because you just shot 8 rounds of 30-06. Everyone is deaf.
Amen. And it is so true. It is so true. And I know that because I actually, my earmuff popped off because I was, it popped off.
So you went from
that ringing in your ear outweighs the ping
all the time. Tinnitus.
In fact, I think it just camouflages though. All you hear is end block clips going bing.
Yeah, it's like the world's worst tuning fork.
Yeah, pretty much.
So you went from the M1.
Mm-hmm.
Then when did you move on to Eugene Stoner's greatest creation?
That's a good question because I confess, once I started going down the rabbit hole of rifles and shotguns and all that, for a while there, I'm gonna say I was kind of a prude. I was like, I'm not so sure I want to get an AR because everyone has an AR. Mm-hmm. And I was at one of the local gun stores where I was at, and I saw the newer version with the new chassis with the Ruger Mini 14. Well, and I was like, same caliber, not an AR. But I started reading article after article after article and looking at all the pros and cons, and I was like, nah. And then I bought about like 8 more 1911s in between, and then finally, my first AR was a Daniel Defense. I decided to pony up, spend some money, and because I pause there. For me, I don't make a lot of income in doing what I do. My predecessors would rely on eggs, at the monastery and bread if you gave it to them. And fortunately, in modern times, I don't have to rely on eggs and bread. And but I do like totem holes. You guys ever eat totem holes? Do you know what a totem hole is?
No.
You butter your bread both sides, cut a hole out in the middle, fry your egg in the middle of it.
Yes, I just called it egg in a hole.
Yeah, that's what I called it too.
Egg in a hole. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, no,
How the hell did I go there? I don't know. Oh, money, income.
Yep.
Right. And so my wife for a long time, and this is a segue. My wife was totally anti-guns for a very long time. Part of that is one of the guys when she was in high school she dated grew up Marine Corps, and he thought it was entertaining that the first time his girlfriend shot a gun was hand her a 12 gauge, right? And not even tell her how to hold it or anything. If you're one of those guys, you're an asshole. Just saying. Sorry if you guys did that to your
no.
You just don't do that, right?
I spend a large amount of my time trying to correct those problems.
Exactly, firearms instructor. Exactly, and so what that meant is later on in marriage, I had to spend a lot of time talking to her about all that. So, she finally embraced the fact that firearms are a passion of mine. She embraced the fact that we're going to have them in our home. It took me a long time to finally convince her that every gun has a different purpose. The thing is, I started running out of purposes.
Did you convince her to become a shooter?
One step at a time, right?
All right.
Yeah, exactly. And I can tell you the story, which exactly goes under the Second Amendment. So in my first call, this is where guns became a part of my family, my married family, to this day. My father and I have been shooting for a very long time, but we lived in a community, and we had 3 attempted break-ins in the church parsonage. Now, if you're going to break in to the community pastor's house, you either have some incredible cojones, or you are really an evil, twisted son of a gun, or you're strung out on meth, or all 3 of those combined, right? And the first time it ever happened, I had taken some of my high schoolers from our church youth group up into Canada. And when I got back from that trip, my wife had told me that in the middle, her mom was staying visiting for the week. And in the middle of the night, one of the nights, about 2 a.m, literally someone's kicking in the back door. And that was, she grabbed my .357 Magnum, and our old English bulldog named Winston started chasing, was already at the door barking as the kicks were getting louder and louder. And she grabs the .357, swings the door open, points the guy in the face. He let out some expletives, took off running. Fortunately, she didn't pull the trigger in that situation because he took off running. This is where we have the triangle, right? The firearms instructor,
the deadly force triangle.
The deadly force triangle of threat, or whatever we want to call it, right?
Means, opportunity, and jeopardy.
Exactly. Anyway, so I get home. She tells me this whole story. I'm just furious, right? And she was petrified, just absolutely petrified. And actually, what started leading to that story, I get home from Canada, and she goes, "Hey, honey, I think I want to buy a gun." To which, like 1,000 angels started singing, "Hallelujah, hallelujah!" Right? Because I'm thinking, you get a gun, I get a gun, right? I think that's kind of that slope, right? But then she told me why, and then that's when it really sank home. And because at first I was just like, because as the hallelujahs are going off, I'm also thinking, you were totally not in favor of really guns. She wasn't in favor of me not having them. She just was incredibly uncomfortable with them. And after that situation, and then when she told me the story, I was like, okay. And then the conversation began. We will do that. We'll go down. But what I'd like you to do is we're going to talk to some of my contacts, and I would like you to actually learn how to use it. And where we were at on the Black Hills of South Dakota, they actually have women only firearms courses, and she did. She went to 3 of them. She had to try the little purse carry guns. She had to try the revolvers. Her first was Ruger LCR, a little snub dose, which many would say is like the worst choice for her first gun. She's phenomenal. She is phenomenal. She's done courses. She's run and gun, shot with it. She'll put it in the 10 ring every single time, which is terrifying because I've shot competitively and I can't shoot as well as her. And I try to get her to shoot competitively with me. And she's like, I don't need to do that.
You know, we talk about there's a guy who shoots competitively with us
In our group,
in our group here, and he is a transplant. He
came from California.
Yep, came.
Oh yeah, I met him.
Yep,
interesting guy.
Yeah, interesting guy, great guy, and he runs a Smith & Wesson TRR-8, and will run that 8-shot revolver like it's his damn job, and just is amazing with it.
Well, and it's because he's got to shoot what he's got, right?
Well, dude, he has other guns,
right? But is that what he learned on though? Is that
that was his dream gun?
Oh, okay.
And he bought it because it was the first thing he bought when he got to South Dakota, because you couldn't get it in California.
And then he got the moon clips as well, so he was actually he's fantastic with it.
Yeah,
great shot.
Yep. So that was kind of the beginning of firearms in our family. For me, though, the AR platform specifically, I guess as we've grown as a family in the firearms world, we've grown in the reality of we want to be able to provide for our family, protect our family, protect our community. A lot of people don't know what the word pastor means. Pastor actually means shepherd. Comes from the Latin pasture, which means that the pasture is called to take the sheep out to pasture to feed them. And in the theological sense, feed them the word, feed them literally, and to protect them, right?
Mhm.
And so I've always, kind of thought to myself, I would never want to be in that position. But when I'm called into a community and congregation, I am that far that I would protect the flock. People have asked, do you carry it in church? Yes, I do. Every single time I'm in worship. People don't know that because I believe in conceal.
Yep.
But and I hope the enemies, my enemies, are not listening to your podcast.
But I wouldn't have a problem if you had a 1911 strapped to your side.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm talking like leg holster,
Like in a garter.
By the power vested in me by the Lord and John Moses Browning.
Sure. Well, and I know we're talking about some really debatable stuff.
It is. There's a large portion of it of people who debate about this and like guns in churches and guns have not. And I know I have long said, and in my classes, I do a spiel about this, and it is for a long time everyone looked at houses of worship. It doesn't matter what
holy sacred would never dare.
Yeah, that is a safe place to be. No one would ever go and do that.
Times are changing.
Well, and in the Middle Ages, in Martin Luther's time, and there is actually a phrase called "cry sanctuary."
Mm.
So if you were a criminal, like literally, like you just murdered someone,
yep,
and law enforcement or those authorities literally witness you do it, and you can outrun them to the church. If you made it into the church, and some of the old traditional altars had handles or horns on the side of it, and if you made it into the church and you held onto the altar, it's called claiming sanctuary or crying sanctuary, which means they cannot, and it was respected. Understand, you cannot do that. And then it was the priest's decision at that point, under the circumstances, to determine what to do. That was back when churches, from every perspective of the fence, was like this holy sacred place that you dare not do anything controversial in.
Oh, 100%.
Now we actually, now I live in a time where I'm considered a soft target, or what's the technical term?
No, soft target.
Soft target, right? Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's why we aren't in John Wick's time with the Continental being sacred ground.
Oh, John Wick.
Oh, yeah.
I got the John Wick posters in my office at the church.
Well, then anyone who walks in should know that you've got a Benelli 12 gauge under the pulpit.
Right. And maybe it's a tangent, but let me also be clear out there, like for those listening to us, I'm not advocating that just any Joe Schmo pastor should carry a gun in church.
Oh, no.
I do, because I train often. Dooley, I've trained with you numerous times. I cannot count how many thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds I put down range. And not only that, we as a congregation have had conversations. We have a lot of our law enforcement. A lot of people don't know, but I'm also chaplain for all branches of law enforcement in the central state of South Dakota. And so we have great relationships in that respect. A lot of military friends. I've had those conversations with our officers that are members of our church, asking them and encouraging them, which of course they support that and carry themselves. And we've had those conversations and risk assessments. So that's my disclaimer. That's my disclaimer, for anyone that's out there thinking, oh.
That was actually the favorite thing of the last church I attended, is between the military, law enforcement, first responders, we had a gun on every exit in the church and every door coming into the sanctuary.
Sure.
It was, we knew who was carrying, we knew what they were carrying, how many rounds they were carrying, and we were prepared.
Nope.
And I think that's a fantastic option to have in the day and age we live.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I know that it's when I do my little spiels about that, and the fact that it for a long time was looked at as a soft target. That has rapidly been changing, because now Michael Bain, who does downrange radio, says a phrase that I think is incredibly apropos. He goes, when you chum for monsters, they will come out.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And when you are constantly beating the drum,
Shark Week,
or when people or the news or the media, however you want to put it, is constantly churning up these things, and this could happen, and it's somebody should come in and do these things, and they're chumming the waters to bring monsters out. And unfortunately, there are mentally disturbed people who are broken inside who want to do harm to other humans. They go, that's a great idea.
They follow through, and then we have 2 months of advocacy for the Second Amendment to be taken away from God-fearing, good-hearted Americans.
Well, it's not even just the Second Amendment. I mean, there's people who have driven cars into crowds leaving churches.
100%.
Well, let's exactly. But let's where do we go about this? For instance, let me tell you the first time I ever held a loaded AK-47, which was not an AR-15.
But this is a great story.
So perspective, right? Our culture right now is so inoculated with debates on who should be allowed to own a gun. Should people be allowed to own a gun? Where should they be allowed to own a gun?
Mm-hmm.
What locations? Soft targets, hard targets, this and that, yada, yada, yada. And then we have these glaring examples of places like Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. So my first year in seminary, we had to do what we call our cross-cultural experience.
Sure.
Some of my colleagues went to Israel, which I really wanted to do at the time. Did go 2 years ago. Fascinating. That's another topic for another time. By the way, they carry a lot of guns over in Israel. So yeah, if you want to bring in like the holy conversation about, the Holy Land's full of them. And you know exactly which side of the fence you're on by the rifle.
That's because Jesus said, if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one.
Well, he does say that. What's also interesting is, so this is really twisted. Bethlehem, right, the city where Jesus is born, is Palestinian territory.
Yep.
And you want to know how you know when you're there? When it's no longer an M4, but it's an AK in the hands of the guards, and it's really surreal and all. But anyways, back to the story at hand. So my cross-cultural experience, I'm in Southside Chicago. I'm thinking, well, I've heard a lot about Chicago in the news. This is 16, 17 years ago. And I'm not naive. I'm not naive at all. A little background. My father grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My father grew up in a street gang. This is back in the 60s and 70s, which is substantially different. The gang mentality was very different back then than it is today. It was more about neighborhood turf race, things like that, and really unique stuff. So you got that
Warriors come out and play.
Yeah, man. I watched that movie with my dad one time. I gave him so much shit. I was like, "Is that you? Like, were you guys the ones on the roller skates, with face paint?" And he's like, "Shut up." But it was more like West Side Story without the dancing and singing, right? And so my dad grows up in Brooklyn. My mom grows up in Minnesota, rural Minnesota. And it was the Air Force that brought them together. So I'm a product of veterans as well, both Air Force officers and intelligence from way back in the day. But so I spent many times in my childhood over in New York City. So big cities didn't freak me out at all like that. But I remember going to Southside Chicago. And the first night I'm meeting up with some of my classmates who were in the seminary in Chicago. I'm down at their apartment, which is down in Hyde Park. I don't know if you know what Hyde Park is. Hyde Park is, I'm going to get the numbers wrong. It's like a few square miles of, they call it the white man's oasis. It's in Southside. It's where all the universities, it's where the University of Illinois and the seminaries and all of that is located right there. And I was taught when you're in Hyde Park, there are more law enforcement officers in Hyde Park than all of Chicago Metro combined at any given time. And so I'm in Hyde Park, sitting outside on the patio of my classmate's apartment, and it sounds like what back here in South Dakota, the 4th of July, crack, 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 boom, 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 boom. And I mean, it was just non-stop. And then you'd get like maybe 15 minutes of reprieve, and then just crack, 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 crack. And I looked at him, I go, it's January, right? I said, dude, that totally sounds like the 4th of July. He goes, well, that ain't fireworks. I said, is that like every night? And he goes, that's every night. He said, you'll get used to it. So I wind up, I'm down there for a few months doing an independent study project. And I'm out one night. I am in Englewood. And I'm with what they called at that time, there was this nighttime ministry called the Triple C Bus, which stood for cookies, coffee, and condoms, right? Like literally, we drove around to these different neighborhoods, different nights of the week. We'd be at different intersections, and we'd hand out cookies, cups of coffee, and condoms. And we had, at any given time, we had a couple nurses volunteering their time. And moms would bring their babies, their kids up to the bus. And we're talking in the middle of the night, you know, just seeking, basically they're triaging them, telling them, hey, this looks like it's virus. This looks like you need to get to the doctor as soon as you can in the morning. There were a few times when I was there, they called in EMTs, ambulances, take someone to the hospital. We had social workers to just give advice. And everyone in the CCC bus were all volunteering their times. There's a guy, big guy. He was a DSS worker, and then I was the pastor, and I was the pastor. I wasn't ordained at this time, but I was in the pastoral role. And I'll never forget it. One night we're going up on this one intersection, and the big guy, the DSS guy, his name was Dante, and Dante says, Pastor, this intersection's kind of rough. And I said, okay. He said, just keep your head on the swivel, and just keep your eyes out. He said, keep your back to the bus, and just keep an eye out on what's going on. He said, if anything looks risky, if there's any threats or anything going on, just get in the bus and we leave. And I was like, this shit's kind of real, huh? And he goes, yeah, absolutely it is down here. And so I'm standing outside the bus, and we're there for about an hour, and I see this group of it's like eight guys coming up, hooded sweatshirts, bandanas on their faces, firearms in hands. And I look at Dante. Dante goes, these guys are good. I'm like, I grew up in South Dakota. It doesn't look like what I identify as good. He goes, these guys are good. He goes, they come for the coffee and the cookies. By the way, the condoms are for the prostitutes. They would rather them at least practice safe sex in the reality of their business, right? And then we also had a dispensary bin right there, so that anyone dealing with their drug addictions could at least put them there instead of in the boulevards for kids to step on, you know. So really, really unique bus, and so here
sounds like it.
Yeah, dude,
it's got a sharps container and everything.
Exactly. So here we are, and these kids come up, and literally they're kids. And the oldest was like 17 years old. The youngest of them was 9, and the AK was in the hands of a 9-year-old. And they start talking to me.
Well, they were made for conscripted child soldiers.
Fair enough, right? Fair enough. And sadly enough, it's here in the homeland. It's not. We're not talking Africa. We're talking South Side.
Yeah.
And so they start talking to me. I'm very much the minority in this moment, and they haven't met me before. So they start picking my brain and calling me some words and things like that. And it was a little intimidating. I was like, I've never felt so intimidated by a 9-year-old in my life until then. And finally, I broke the ice with the tattoos.
Yeah.
I started asking them about their tattoos. It's January. So, I mean, they had their sweatshirts and everything, and coats and pants and everything. But I noticed the facial tattoos. So I started asking them. And the one kid, he goes, what the fuck you know about tattoos? Here I am in January in Southside. I take my coat off, take my shirt off, and show them my ink, right? Boom, icebreaker. So we start talking tattoos and this and that. And then they're like, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm going to school to be a pastor. And I'm hoping at some point, maybe you guys will let me pray with you or something. And I'll never forget this one kid. He's one of the middle-aged kids in the group. He goes, yeah, so like church, right? And I was like, yeah, church. He goes, I go to church with my grandma, with what do you call it? Mima. And he said they do this kind of thing. They do this thing. It's like with like bread. There's bread, and they say it's wine. I don't know if it's wine. Sometimes I've heard they do grape juice, and I go, "Are you talking about Holy Communion?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Can we do that?" I'm like, right? And Dante is standing there, and he's like, I go, Dante, we got that bag of Doritos in there? He goes, yeah, those are my Doritos. I was like, I need your Doritos, and I need that 2-liter Pepsi. Now, for those that are super, super pietistic, we can make some deep debates about doing communion with Doritos and Pepsi. But in this moment, you want to talk about the Holy Spirit. In this moment, I get out Doritos and Pepsi. I said, guys, what we're going to do, we're going to go around the circle. I'm going to commune you. You commune your friend, your brother, whatever you guys call each other, and we're going to go around the circle. We're going to do that. They're like, we can do that. I'm like, we're doing it. I don't know if we can do that, but we're doing it, right? And that the kid right next to me is the 9-year-old, right? So I give him the body of Christ, blood of Christ shed for you, and he takes it, And then he's willing to help and go to the next guy, but he's got this AK in his hands. And so he literally, like, he hands me this AK. Now I'm holding this AK-47 in Englewood South Side, right? But I was like teared up. I'm watching them go around the circle, giving communion, and then like here I am, like with my shirt, wiping my prints off this AK and handing it back over. And the kid looks at me and goes, "Don't be an asshole." And I'm like, I don't know what you do with this shit, right? And so it was just kind of like mind blowing, and found myself thinking, if I wasn't in the pastoral role, having a good relationship conversation with these guys, and I knew the possibility of the other people at the end of that barrel in the night, you want to know what the Second Amendment's about? Well, that's a part of it, you know? And unfortunately, our media and everything is making it all out to be about this threat against the nation, this and that. I know what the Second Amendment says. I know what our Constitution says. I very much support it and completely agree with it. Yes, it wasn't talking about Southside Chicago in gangland.
It also wasn't talking about hunting deer.
And it absolutely was not talking about hunting and sportsmen's rights. But at the same time, it was talking about Southside Chicago. Just didn't know it yet, right?
Yeah.
It also wasn't talking about a rural community in South Dakota where I was in my first church, and the church parsonage getting the door kicked in the back while the pastor's out of town. The pastor's wife is at home with her firstborn child and her mom and her dog, right? But I'm pretty damn sure that's what it was about, right? Yeah. There was a tangent for you. There's a story.
Well, that's okay, because that worked out great. But that really is, and it boils down to the root of it. It's the Second Amendment is for everyone. There's it is not, it doesn't matter, race, creed, or color. It's Second Amendment is there to give anyone who is an American citizen or anyone, here, the ability to protect themselves.
Right.
Because it is not the biggest thing I've always found. And I've, believe it or not, I've gotten into constitutional debates about the Bill of Rights and have explained to people before that you have to read like the whole preamble to the Constitution before you get into the Bill of Rights to really start going through it. And I say you should read the Federalist Papers as well. But it's these truths we hold self-evident. This is all men by the Creator are given these inalienable rights. And the government doesn't give you the right to do anything. The Constitution is to protect the citizens from the government, not to have the government allow you to do anything else.
Right. And I don't think it'll be a debatable issue with your listening audience on here, just guessing based on the conversation we had ahead of time. But I'd be curious, if this ended up on CNN or Fox News at some point down the road, and guarantee you're going to have other people come out of the woodwork and say, well, Pastor, what would Jesus have done? Or faith or religion talks about being a pacifist or turning the other cheek. Yeah. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard well, shouldn't you turn the other cheek? Well, we have to remember that the turning the other cheek piece is when we are talking about disputes, anger, frustration, debates about the law, and in which those things happen. I think I'm speculating. But we're not talking about genuine acts of evil. Yeah. When Jesus, that's my personal interpretation. There are other theologians and pastors that will probably debate me to the end of the night on that exact topic. But, for me, there is a difference, especially when you use the image pastor, which is to protect the flock, protect the sheep. Well, how do you protect the flock by turning the other cheek? Because I don't know if you guys know the pastor's number one tool to ward off the wolf. Do you know what that is? Staring him down. When I actually, when I was in Israel, our professor, we were out on the Shepherd's Hill in Bethlehem, and he was telling us that. He said, guys, there's the Shepherd's Crook. That actually was, he said that could be used as a weapon, but rarely was. That was more to correct the sheep. I would tap them on the side to move them this way, or literally put the crook around their neck and pull them away from harm's way or out of a makeshift fence or something. He said, but the number one tool to defend the flock, because the shepherds and their sons or their nephews, they would each take turns all night long on shifts, keeping an eye on the horizon. And you got to know Israel. Israel is covered in rocks. I mean, there's rocks amongst the grass. And soldier, you've kept watch at night, right?
Yep,
Your eyes get tired, right? Imagine just staring at a bunch of rocks, wondering which one's going to move, right? Wondering if
I have done that.
Right. Exactly. And so in their context, I mean, they're looking at every single rock, looking at the horizon. Imagine if it's a cloudy night, it's even worse, right? Wondering if one of those rocks is a wolf. Well, if they spot a wolf and the wolf is trying to sneak up on the herd, because the wolf is only effective if it actually gets in the herd, hence the phrase, the wolf is sheepskin, right? The number one tool is once the wolf notices that the shepherd sees them, the shepherd cannot take his eyes off the wolf. Because if the shepherd maintains eye contact, the wolf will not come into the herd. It's fascinating, right? And so how do you turn the other cheek when you literally have evil about ready to face your flock or get within your flock, right? I don't know. It's gotten debatable. And so I don't think that the Second Amendment does not give you license to do stupid crap, right?
No, it
we
does
talked
not.
about that in firearms class, right?
Yep,
the triangle.
It does not give you a license to do stupid things. No. It's Spider-Man said it best: with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah. It's your absolute last resort.
Yeah, it is. A firearm is a tool in a toolbox, and as much as I hate using that term or phrase, it couldn't be better. It is an option. Sometimes it is. It should be your last option you go to. Unless you hit a situation where it dictates where you go all the way past like verbal, physical cues and stuff like that. If you're at something where it's like, okay, nope, this one's just going to 11, and we crack open the special safe and pull out the toys that go fast.
Well, I mean, the Second Amendment was never meant to be I'm coming for you. It was always meant as a last resort protection sort of idea. And I mean, you and I aren't going to go looking for trouble. You're not going to go looking for trouble.
No.
But by God, I will defend you and myself if trouble comes.
And that's where that common sense anxiety comes from me. By the way, common sense doesn't exist.
No, it's a superpower.
Like before COVID, I used to say common sense ever want their constituents, their taxpayers, those that put the food on the table and help defend the nation, help all those things. Why would they ever want to be put in a position where they're about to exit the world because of someone else's evil?
Yeah.
Right? Take it from a completely different perspective. Let's not talk about it from gun violence issue, which is an issue, but let's call it what it really is, right? Let's not even look at that angle. What I'm talking about, and God help Australia and half of Europe and countries that have made these rules. I mean, quite frankly, you are now giving the opportunity for evil to take your, I hate to reduce us down to tax-paying ATMs.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of national budgets and national security and all those pieces, we're ATMs, right?
Yeah, somebody has to produce in order to have
exactly. I mean, it just doesn't appear. Which we can go on another topic there, but let's stay focused, right? Why would any agency
fire up the printer?
Why would any entity, institution, government agency want the ATM machines to be shut down because of evil, right? And that's why the disputes on Second Amendment, this is my pastoral father, husband, patriotic perspective. That's why the Second Amendment debates have nothing to do with actually your defense and protection.
Well, I've gone back to this several times with other people, and you're right. It's never been, the debates aren't about protecting you from yourself or anything like that. Because also remember, the Second Amendment was written by people who had privatized warships.
Fair enough.
It's so I know that I was told no history lessons tonight, but something like 85% of the cannons used during the Revolutionary War were privately owned.
Right.
It's yes, you could go buy a cannon, and
F-15s.
And
I can't afford it. I wish I could. You can't. Hey, I can fulfill my Top Gun dream.
Yes, you could.
Except they used F-14s.
They did. They
Tomcats.
Tomcats, and you flew. They most of the Top Guns flying was off of the ground. They didn't land on a postage stamp in the ocean, but
Oh,
you know,
nice man.
as long as we have that shirtless volleyball scene, I'm totally in.
Oh, jeez. Goose, get back here, you. Yeah. Dude, I told you I could quote like the whole movie. Okay, soundtrack's done.
Yeah, but no, it's understanding. Like, you put a really good spin on, or not spin, voice to why it is that the Second Amendment and like the Constitution is such an important thing to have. It's not just about like, oh, it's these handful of rights we have that, you know, we need to do this and push forward so that it's for those people in Chicago that,
Yeah,
you know, it's a different world there.
yeah. And unfortunately there, the lines are so blurred. It literally, you know, there's the nickname Chirac. It's literally a war zone.
Mhm.
It really, it is. The last time I was there was a couple years ago with my high schoolers. I took them on a mission trip. And one of our hosts pulled me aside. He said, do you want to, and we're back in Englewood. And he says, do you want to see a video from the public security camera? And there literally is two guys, broad daylight. We're talking like noon lunch hour.
Yeah.
Broad daylight, roll up on a guy, shoot him dead right there, broad daylight, getting out of his car, shoot him dead on the spot. And his pregnant girlfriend gets out the other side. And it was a gory, grotesque video. You can see the blood spraying all over the sidewalk. And and I hear on this closed circuit security camera, I'm watching a woman lose her life. And because the lines have been so damn blurred on all that stuff. And yeah, it's just heart-wrenching. But you know, in the meantime, one of the things, I don't know, how much time do we have, Dooley?
Well, we are coming up on an hour, but we could probably go a little bit over. Our hour is a guideline more than a rule.
Yeah. I guess one of the last thing I would say that has kind of struck me as recent, I don't remember who said it, and I should. I try to be as educated as I can in different things, but it's the good old phrase: you cannot have freedom and security at the same time. You have to give up one to have the other.
That's a Ben Franklin quote.
Is that Ben Franklin?
Ben Franklin. Those who give up liberty for security deserve neither.
Right. So it's a modified version of that, right?
Yep.
And that's where we're kind of wrestling with. It's like, you know, if we want to give up our personal ability to secure ourselves, and we want to rely, and you and I have a deep respect for our law enforcement friends and military friends, they cannot be there. I mean, if you call 911 right now, because if my wife was able to do that, here was the kicker. So here was the kicker. Here's your security freedom perspective. So after the guy ran away, of course, my wife called 911. Here's the deal. In the county that we lived in, the deputy officers are off duty at 11 p.m. So they are reliant on, it's Pennington County. They were reliant on the South Dakota Highway Patrol at that point. I don't know if you know Pennington County. You guys do. But for listeners out there, we're talking, I don't know if you've ever been to the great state of South Dakota. Wall Drug, which is, what's 54 miles from Rapid City?
Yeah.
To where I lived in Hill City. If I left Wall, it would take me about an hour and 45 minutes driving the speed limit from Wall Drug to Hill City.
Yeah.
Right? About.
Yeah.
Highway Patrol gets that call. Heaven forbid the trooper that's on call at that point is out near Wall doing speed clocking or this and that. Or heaven forbid, he's actually in the midst of a call, right?
Yep.
And gets that call. That's a long. Let's reduce it. Okay, so he can go, 90 miles an hour, lights blazing?
Oh, I'd say about
On the interstate.
I'd say about 120 because I had a friend who made it from Mobridge to Aberdeen in an hour and 10 minutes.
So 120 on the interstate.
Sorry, I just might have ratted around.
You get into the hills though.
Yeah.
Once you're heading out of Rapid, you're in the hills in the middle of the night.
You can't do anything.
You're not going to be doing 100.
Let's reduce an hour 45 to an hour.
Yeah.
It's going to be the
Yeah.
longest hour of her life, right?
100%.
And it was.
Yeah.
And it genuinely was the longest hour of her life. And when he got there, and she said, is there anything I could have done differently? Is there anything I could do? He said, ma'am, I encourage you to buy a gun. I think that's a good closing comment.
Yeah.
That really is.
That's a very well-intended law enforcement officer painting the reality for her of what that meant in that moment.
There's another cliche phrase in the firearms world, and it's when seconds count, the police are minutes away. And it's nothing bad about saying that at all. I mean, I know that we all have a lot of friends here who are local police officers, and I have had things happen where like an accident happens out here at the corner quite often, and people will call the police, and I'll come around and start assessing the situation, checking for medical, everything like that, going into first responder mode, and it'll be 5 to 10 minutes sometimes before anyone shows up. I've left the house because had an incident where police were called. A guy got assaulted. He was in his house, and somebody was intoxicated on several substances and walked into the wrong apartment and beat the crap out of a kid because it was not a good deal. And he called me because he couldn't get a hold of anyone else. So at 3:00 in the morning, to check on him, and I go, so you called the cops, right? And they said, yeah, I totally called the cops. And I was there talking to him, and sitting with him. And when one of the officers on duty shows up, he goes, what are you doing here? And I go, well, he called you guys, and then he called me. And Andy was the cop. He goes, well, I mean, kid, you couldn't pick a better person to call after the cops, but as that goes on, we
can't have a podcast without our assistant showing up.
Yes, our lovely assistant. But no, it is one of those. It is one of those things where there's a million things happening in the world at any given time, and they might be right around the corner, or they might be 45 minutes away.
Right.
And that, unfortunately, is part of the things of living life with other humans.
Well, that's why my heart goes out, this whole situation, like with Afghanistan. I've talked to our military veterans, you guys, others, that are trying to grapple with what was it for? Why? I'm talking about the present. I mean, you want to talk about another country. Well, our enemy now has thousands of firearms in their hands. And the common folk, none.
Yep.
Lined up. I'll give you a pastoral perspective. One of the most heart-wrenching stories. I think we'll probably close. You're the host. I'm not telling you to close, but I think this is just something to think about.
It's from the pulpit. He's wrapping up. I can hear.
Yeah, amen. Right. One of the most heart-wrenching articles I read 2 weeks ago was a colleague who supports mission development over in Afghanistan. He literally was on the phone with some of his counterparts over in Afghanistan, checking in on them. How are you guys doing? What are you doing? They said the Taliban is in our neighborhood, and I've gathered as many as we can. We're going to pray. We're going to worship. I mean, this is like this beautiful story of you want to talk about what worship should be? Absolutely. And they're in the middle of worship, and he says, "Can I worship with you? Can I just stay on the phone and worship with you?" And they said, "Absolutely." So here they are singing and worshiping, and the doors get kicked in, and all of a sudden, all you hear is screaming, gunshots. Phone is dead. That's it. Perspective, Second Amendment. Think it's kind of important.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. And on that Debbie Downer of a note,
I'm sorry, that's not even laughable, but the Debbie Downer piece, yeah.
Yep. I'll always try and bring levity to a terrible thing. and my dark sense of humor will come across in spades sometimes.
Right.
But I think we've covered this one pretty good. Thank you so much for coming on. We'll have to have you come on again.
Sure.
Just because talking about how important some of the rights are is an incredible thing, especially getting it from another view. So, Garth, where can they find us?
Well, you know, they can always find us at the AR-15 podcast 2.0 at gmail.com, AR-15 podcast on Facebook, obviously. If we thank you guys for coming in and watching live with us. And then, of course, the AR-15 podcast 2.0 on the Instagram. You can also get on our network page and find our affiliate programs, as well as our Teesprings for the merchandise we do have. We have a little bit. We're looking to get a little bit more, but we do appreciate you guys supporting us in that way. And beyond that, happy trails until we meet again.
And I'm still not singing. So, Craig, you got any other parting words?
Can I pray? Can I say a prayer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
I'm gonna close this in prayer. Dear Lord, we give thanks for the opportunity to speak to the people, speak to people who are listening, and I just ask you to pray for this country, pray for our families, pray for people all across the world that are facing evil and facing death each and every day. I give thanks that death is not the final answer, but Lord, I just ask you to give us the opportunity to provide as much life as possible so that we can continue to help the people around us. And I give thanks for these guys that have invited me on and just to be able to share the stories. And I pray that they're, I don't think they call it ministry, but it very much is what it is. I pray that their ministry continues to impact the listeners each and every week. So thanks be to God. Amen.
And on that note, I'm still not singing. And you folks out there, you stay safe and stay armed.
But you got to get copyrights for that.